did this video yesterday on the idea that we should open up Judaism kind of as a spiritual enhancement for anyone who wishes to engage with it. And I don't mean self-help. I heard recently that the Dalai Lama was once asked what thing Westerners should stop doing. And he surprised the person who asked him this by saying they should stop meditating. You think he's a Buddhist master, why would he say stop meditating? And he said, because in Buddhism, you meditate on behalf of others. He said in the West, people meditate on behalf of themselves. He said they're missing the whole point. And I take that religion should not be self-help. It should actually be engaged in spiritual transformation and self-reflection. And I think for Jews, that having the confidence to be able to say we actually have something to offer the world would also go hand in hand with us being able to have confidence in our theology and belief in God. It would probably surprise a lot of non-Jews to realize the fact that most American Jews tend to be highly secular. And in terms of our, not just in practice, but our beliefs, most American Jews, I think we are overrepresented when it comes to atheism, agnosticism, and just general unease with affirmations of God. We are like the polar opposite of African Americans, who are much more as individually and as a group, much more affirming that there is a God, just regardless of religious levels. And so Jewish people, we tend to think of God as a metaphor. And that's something that's even been taught in liberal Judaism. God is goodness, God is gratitude, God is thankfulness, God is helping the poor. The thing is, though, that idea, that's not something, you don't wake up in the morning and express gratitude for gratitude. You don't wake up in the morning and express thankfulness for thankfulness. You don't talk about there being a force, an underlying force in the world, and go out and offer prayers to gravity. I mean, that's not a way of living. And the Jewish tradition, you can be a non-believer and still be a good Jew, because we are much more about how you live, how you behave, even textual study. Like, you can do all those things, but I think that the relationship with God, I think that we're at a huge deficit with this amongst the Jewish people, and that we should return to this. I was reading this book when it came out called Here All Along. This came out in 2019, and I returned to this book quite a lot. I have it even in audio, and will listen to it probably once or twice a year, usually around the big Jewish holidays in the fall and the spring. But Sarah Horowitz was she was a writer for Michelle Obama, and she went to an Introduction to Judaism course. She was born and raised Jewish, but really didn't know the tradition. And she went to like a basic Intro to Judaism course, found it so fascinating that she took another one, and then she began studying, and she wrote this book. She wrote a book last year called As a Jew. I believe she's in her mid to late 40s, and she's studying now to be a rabbi. So that's the path that she's undergone. But one thing that was really interesting, and she talks about in this book, when she's learning about the ways that Judaism says you're supposed to care about other people's feelings, the way you're supposed to avoid gossip, the way we engage with textual study, the reason behind our holidays and Shabbat, and how we're supposed to treat the poor, all of that fascinated her. But she struggled the most with the idea of having an interactive relationship with God. She was more of a doubter, and I would say leaned probably more towards unbelief than belief. Maybe there's something, but it's not personal. And she went to this spiritual retreat where they were trying to do this Jewish custom that's really popular among certain groups of Hasidim, the ultra-religious Jews. It's called Devekut. In Israeli Hebrew, I think Ashkenazic Jews, they tend to say Devekus is the way they pronounce it. And that just means to cling. And what you do is you go off into the woods, you go off into the forest. It's something that was done in Eastern Europe among Hasidic Jews. And you just talk to God as if God is engaged in a conversation. It's a conversational, spontaneous prayer. And it's whatever you're feeling, and it's emotional. If you're sad or crying or yelling or screaming or whispering, it's very vulnerable. And a lot of Jews probably don't know about this because it's done individually. When we get together as a group, this is not something we do. We don't do this in the synagogue. We don't have Deveka sessions in the synagogue. You go out, it's individual. It's between you and God. But we've lost that spirituality. And Sarah Horowitz, she was actually struggling with this. She said, I don't know how to, it seems ridiculous to me. And she was basically told, imagine it. Can you, if you thought, what if God is real and God is interested in you? What would you want to say? and she goes out into the woods and she has this very emotional experience, which I myself have had this similar thing happen where I know all the arguments for and against, and maybe there's God, maybe there's not, but there's something about just saying, what if we imagined it? What if we had the confidence of our tradition to say, okay, let's just, give God a chance. Let's imagine that the God that we've heard about is in fact real. And what would we say? What would we feel if we were trying to interact with that entity, which is the entity of all entities in the universe? And I think that's actually the key. I think for Jewish people to open up the tradition, I think one thing that we need to do, and that would benefit us as well as anyone who wishes to engage with the tradition, is to really start thinking about how we can have and it sounds like an evangelical Christian thing, but this is Jewish, this is rooted in our tradition as well. How can we have a relationship with God? Because relationship with God, that's covenant. That's what we have. That's what makes Jewish people who we are, is the covenant that we have with God, and that's an agreement, the treaty we have with God. And we're kind of ignoring the whole partnership aspect of that. And we're like, oh, we're God's partners and we're doing things, but we're never really interacting with God. And I think that if we were to do it, even from the place of uncertainty, but with imagination and confidence, I think that would be a game changer for us.